Ethan Cole had perfected the art of disappearing in plain sight, until the night a stranger at a wedding reception refused to let him vanish. For 15 years, he'd lived behind the wall he built when his wife walked out on their infant daughter. Weddings were torture chambers designed to remind him of everything he'd lost, everything he'd chosen to sacrifice. But when a woman with steel in her voice and kindness in her eyes sat down at the same forgotten table, something shifted. She saw him, really saw him, and that terrified him more than any loneliness ever had. If you're watching from somewhere in the world, drop a comment with your city name. I want to see how far Ethan's story travels. Now, let's begin where all transformations do. At the moment we stop running from ourselves. Pa. The wedding invitation had arrived 3 months ago, cream-colored cardstock with elegant script that made Ethan's chest tighten the moment he recognized the names. Marcus Brennan and Jennifer Shaw. 2 people he'd known since college, back when life still felt full of possibility instead of carefully managed obligation. He'd almost declined. His finger had hovered over the regretfully unable to attend option on the online RSVP for a solid 10 minutes. But Marcus had called him personally, voice warm and insistent through the phone. Ethan, man, you've got to come. 15 years and I haven't seen you at a single wedding, birthday party, or reunion. Emma's old enough now. One night won't hurt. I need my best friend there. Best friend. The words had landed with unexpected weight. Ethan hadn't thought of himself as anyone's best anything in a long time. He was Emma's dad. That was the only identity that mattered, but somehow he'd said yes. And now, standing in the parking lot of the Riverside Country Club in a suit that still fit but felt foreign against his shoulders, he was regretting that decision with every fiber of his being. Through the tall windows, he could see the reception hall already filling with people. Couples, mostly. Arms linked, heads bent together in conversation, that easy intimacy that came from building a life with someone. Ethan's hands tightened on his steering wheel. You can do this, he muttered to himself. 2 hours. Show your face. Congratulate Marcus. Leave. The September evening air was warm as he finally forced himself out of the truck. Music drifted from the building, something classical and romantic that made his jaw clench. He straightened his tie, checked his phone one more time for messages from Emma, and walked toward the entrance with the resignation of a man approaching his own execution. Inside, the country club had been transformed into something out of a magazine. White flowers cascaded from tall centerpieces. String lights created a canopy of stars across the ceiling. A jazz quartet played softly near the dance floor. Everything was beautiful, elegant, perfect, and it made Ethan want to turn around and drive home. Ethan Cole, is that really you? He turned to find Marcus striding toward him, face bright with genuine joy, Jennifer on his arm looking radiant in her wedding gown. Before Ethan could respond, Marcus pulled him into a firm embrace. I can't believe you actually came, Marcus said, stepping back but keeping a hand on Ethan's shoulder. Jennifer, you remember Ethan from the photos I've shown you. Of course, Jennifer said warmly, extending her hand. Marcus talks about you all the time. I'm so glad you're here. Ethan managed what he hoped was a convincing smile. Congratulations to both of you. Everything looks incredible. Wait until you see the cake, Marcus laughed. 3 tiers and probably expensive enough to pay for a small car. But enough about that. How's Emma? She must be, 15 now? Just turned 15 last month, Ethan said, and felt his shoulders relax slightly. Talking about Emma was safe territory. Growing up too fast, starting high school this year. That's amazing, Jennifer said. You must be so proud. I am. The words came easily because they were true. Emma was the one part of his life that made sense, the one thing he'd gotten right. Marcus glanced around the filling reception hall. Listen, I know these things aren't really your scene anymore, but I'm really glad you're here. It means a lot. Your seat is... He paused, looking slightly uncomfortable. Well, we had to shuffle some things around with the final count. You're at table 12 toward the back. I'm sorry it's not closer to the front, but that's perfect, Ethan said quickly, relief flooding through him. The back of the room, away from the spotlight, exactly where he wanted to be. Seriously, Marcus, that's great. Marcus looked relieved. Okay, good. Well, I need to go glad hand some relatives, but we'll catch up later, yeah? And there's an open bar, so take advantage. As the couple moved off to greet other guests, Ethan made his way through the crowd toward table 12. He kept his eyes forward, his expression neutral, perfecting the art of moving through a room without inviting conversation. A skill he'd honed over 15 years of school functions, parent-teacher conferences, and grocery store runs where he might encounter people from his old life. Table 12 was indeed at the back, positioned near the exit to the outdoor terrace. Only 2 other place settings shared the round table, which meant he might get lucky and spend most of the evening alone. He could handle that. He pulled out a chair with its back to the wall, giving him a clear view of the room while keeping himself removed from it. The chair had barely settled under him when a woman's voice cut through the ambient music and conversation. Well, this is depressing. Ethan looked up to find a woman standing beside the table, surveying it with an expression that managed to be both amused and resigned. She was probably in her mid-30s, with dark hair pulled back in a simple twist and wearing a navy dress that looked professional rather than festive. She carried herself with a directness that reminded him of Emma's soccer coach, someone who didn't waste time on bullshit. "The table or the seating arrangement?" Ethan asked before he could stop himself. A smile flickered across her face. "Both. I'm Claire Monroe. Apparently we're the island of misfit toys tonight." She set her small clutch on the table and pulled out the chair across from him without waiting for an invitation. Ethan found himself sitting up slightly straighter. "Ethan Cole. And yeah, I was thinking the same thing." Let me guess," Claire said, settling into her chair and immediately reaching for the water glass. "You're here out of obligation, planning to stay exactly long enough to not be rude, and counting the minutes until you can leave?" The accuracy of her assessment startled a laugh out of him. "That obvious? Takes one to know one." She took a sip of water, her eyes scanning the room with the practiced efficiency of someone taking stock of exits. "How do you know the happy couple?" "Marcus and I went to college together, roommates freshman year. We stayed close for a while after graduation, but life got complicated." Ethan paused, then added, "You?" "Jennifer's second cousin. We see each other maybe once every few years at family events. She invited me out of courtesy, and I accepted because my mother would have given me hell if I didn't." Claire's tone was matter-of-fact, without self-pity. "So here I am, solo at the back table, exactly where they put people who don't fit neatly into their seating chart." "At least we're near the exit," Ethan offered. "Silver lining," Claire agreed. "Though I have to say, you look even less comfortable than I feel, and I'm the one who doesn't know anyone here." Ethan shifted in his chair. "Weddings aren't really my thing." "Because you're married and your wife couldn't make it? Or because you're divorced and this is torture?" The question was direct but not unkind. Claire's expression remained open, curious rather than prying. For a moment, Ethan considered giving his standard deflection, the polite non-answer that had served him well for years. But something about Claire's straightforwardness, the way she'd immediately acknowledged their shared exile to table 12, made him answer honestly. "Neither. My wife left when our daughter was 6 months old. I've been raising Emma on my own since then." Claire's eyebrows rose slightly, but there was no pity in her expression, just acknowledgement. 15 years of solo parenting, that's no small thing. "It's just life," Ethan said, uncomfortable with anything that sounded like praise. "You do what needs to be done." "Most people don't, actually," Claire said. "Most people find ways to pass the responsibility to someone else. So yeah, it is something." Before Ethan could respond, a middle-aged woman in a pink dress approached their table, her smile bright and slightly invasive. "Oh, how wonderful! Are you two together?" "No," Claire said immediately, her tone polite but firm. "Just sharing a table." "Oh." The woman's face fell slightly, then brightened with renewed determination. "Well, that's how it starts sometimes, isn't it? 2 people, a wedding, a little romance in the air." "We literally just met 5 minutes ago," Claire interrupted, still polite but with steel underneath. "And I'm perfectly content being alone, thanks." The woman blinked, clearly taken aback by Claire's directness. "Well, I just meant—" "I know what you meant," Claire said, her smile never wavering. "And I appreciate the thought. But I'm good." The woman retreated with a confused expression, and Ethan found himself fighting back a grin. "You don't pull punches, do you?" "Life's too short for unnecessary bullshit," Claire said, reaching for the wine glass that a server had just filled. I learned a long time ago that being polite doesn't mean letting people make you uncomfortable in the name of their own curiosity or matchmaking fantasies. I should learn that skill, Ethan admitted. I usually just avoid situations where it comes up. Hence the back table? Hence the back table. Claire studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. So you've spent 15 years raising your daughter alone. What does that look like? I'm genuinely curious, not being nosy. Ethan found himself answering, which surprised him. It looks like learning to braid hair from YouTube videos at 3 in the morning. It looks like being the only dad at every mother-daughter event until Emma got old enough to be embarrassed by it. It looks like missing most of my own life because hers took up all the space. Not that I'm complaining, he added quickly. She's the best thing that ever happened to me. But it's also exhausting and lonely, Claire said quietly. You can love your kid and still acknowledge that. The words hit something deep in Ethan's chest. He'd never heard anyone say it quite like that before. Most people either praised his sacrifice to the point of discomfort or suggested he should have moved on by now, found someone new, rebuilt his life. No one had simply acknowledged that both things could be true. Yeah, he said finally. It is. I get it, Claire said. Different circumstances, but I get it. I spent 7 years taking care of my mother after her stroke. She died 2 years ago, and I'm still figuring out who I am when I'm not defined by being someone's caretaker. I'm sorry, Ethan said, meaning it. Me too. Claire took another sip of wine. But here's what I've learned. People will try to make you feel like you owe them your story, your pain, your reasons for being alone. They'll act like there's something wrong with you for not constantly seeking partnership or validation. And you know what? Fuck that. Ethan nearly choked on his water. Claire grinned. Sorry, was that too much? No, Ethan said, surprised to find himself smiling. It was perfect. The reception kicked into full gear around them. Dinner was served, filet mignon and roasted vegetables that Ethan barely tasted because he was too busy talking to Claire. They traded stories carefully at first, then with increasing openness. She told him about her work as a contract attorney, the way she'd built a career around the unpredictable schedule of caregiving. He told her about the construction company he'd started, how he'd built it specifically so he could have control over his hours, be available for Emma. You gave up a lot, Claire observed, not as criticism, but as fact. I gave up the life I thought I'd have, Ethan corrected, but I got Emma. That's not nothing. It's everything, Claire agreed, but it's also okay to want more, to be more than just someone's parent. The words settled over Ethan like a weight and a release all at once. Before he could fully process them, the sound of silverware clinking against glass drew everyone's attention to the front of the room. Marcus stood at the head table, microphone in hand, Jennifer beaming beside him. Thank you all for being here tonight to celebrate with us, he began, his voice warm and slightly amplified. Before we get to the cake and the real dancing, I want to take a moment to acknowledge some special people. Ethan relaxed slightly. This was standard wedding fare. Thanking parents, wedding party, maybe a funny story or two. Most of you know that Jennifer and I have been together for 5 years, Marcus continued. But what made our relationship work wasn't just falling in love, it was seeing what real commitment looked like, what it meant to show up every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. Something in Marcus's tone made Ethan's stomach tighten. There's someone here tonight who taught me that, Marcus said, his eyes scanning the crowd. Someone who's been my friend since we were 18 years old, who I've watched become one of the most devoted, selfless people I know. Ethan Cole, where are you? The room erupted in murmurs as heads turned, searching. Ethan felt his blood freeze. Come on, Ethan, stand up, Marcus called out, still smiling. Don't be shy. Every instinct Ethan had screamed at him to stay seated, to disappear into his chair, to somehow become invisible. But hundreds of eyes were searching, finding him at the back table. The weight of their attention was physical, crushing. Stand up, Claire said quietly beside him. It wasn't a command, just a statement. Her hand moved to rest briefly on his arm, steady, grounding. Ethan stood on legs that felt like water. There he is, Marcus raised his glass. 15 years ago, Ethan's wife walked out on him and their 6-month-old daughter. And instead of falling apart, instead of giving up or becoming bitter, he disappeared from our lives. Not because he stopped caring, but because he was too busy being an incredible father. He built a business so he could take his daughter to school every morning. He learned to do hair, to handle mean girls, to be both parents in a world that doesn't make that easy. Ethan, you showed me what love really looks like, what commitment really means. I wouldn't be the man standing here today without that example. The room burst into applause. Genuine, warm, sustained applause that made Ethan's eyes burn and his chest constrict. He managed a nod in Marcus's direction, his throat too tight for words. So here's to Ethan Cole, Marcus finished, raising his glass higher. The best man I know, even if he's too stubborn to claim the title. The applause continued. Ethan stood frozen, every eye in the room on him, every person seeing what he'd spent 15 years trying to hide. Not his shame or his failure, but his sacrifice, his choice, the life he'd built in the shadows while the world moved on without him. He slowly sank back into his chair, face burning, hands shaking slightly. Claire had stood with him, he realized. She'd remained on her feet through the entire toast, her presence solid beside him. Breathe, she said quietly, sitting back down. Just breathe. I need to leave, Ethan managed, his voice rough. You could, Claire agreed, or you could stay. Let people see you. Let yourself be seen. I don't... He stopped, not sure how to finish the sentence. I know, Claire said. Being invisible feels safer. I get it. But Ethan? She waited until he met her eyes. That wasn't pity up there. That was respect. There's a difference. The distinction pierced through his panic. Respect, not pity. Acknowledgement, not sympathy. Marcus hadn't painted him as a victim or a martyr. He'd called him a man who made hard choices and followed through. I haven't been to a wedding in 15 years, Ethan said, the words spilling out before he could stop them. I haven't been on a date, haven't taken a vacation, haven't done anything that wasn't about Emma or work or just surviving the next day. I don't know how to be in a room like this anymore. Then don't worry about the room, Claire said simply. Just worry about this table, this conversation, right now. People were approaching. Ethan could see them out of the corner of his eye. Old friends, acquaintances, people who wanted to reconnect, to congratulate, to bridge 15 years of distance with well-meaning words. His entire body tensed. Want me to run interference? Claire offered, her tone practical. Would you? Absolutely. She stood smoothly as the first couple reached their table, positioning herself slightly in front of Ethan. Hi, I'm Claire. You must be friends of Marcus and Jennifer. The ceremony was beautiful, wasn't it? She deflected with practiced ease, acknowledging people without creating openings for prolonged conversation, protecting Ethan's space without making it obvious. He watched her work with a mixture of gratitude and amazement. When had someone last stood between him and the world like this? When had someone last protected him instead of the other way around? The crowd eventually thinned as the music shifted to something more upbeat, and couples flooded the dance floor. Claire returned to her seat, taking a long sip of wine. Thank you, Ethan said. No problem. Though, fair warning, Marcus is headed this way, and I suspect he won't be deterred. Sure enough, Marcus was weaving through the tables toward them, Jennifer's hand in his. When he reached table 12, his expression was apologetic but firm. I'm sorry if I put you on the spot, Marcus said immediately. But Ethan, man, I meant every word. You're the most stand-up guy I know, and I wanted people to know it. It's okay, Ethan said, surprised to find he meant it. The initial panic had subsided into something else. Not comfort exactly, but acceptance. Congratulations, Marcus. Really, Jennifer's lucky to have you. We're lucky to have each other, Jennifer said, then turned to Claire. And I'm so glad you could make it tonight. It's been too long. The conversation flowed more naturally after that. Marcus and Jennifer stayed for a few minutes, sharing stories about the wedding planning chaos, before being pulled away by more guests. As they left, Marcus squeezed Ethan's shoulder. Don't disappear for another 15 years, okay? Come to the house. Bring Emma. Let us be part of your life again. After they'd gone, Ethan sat in silence for a moment, processing. Claire didn't push, just waited. I've spent so long being invisible, Ethan finally said. I forgot what it felt like to be seen. How does it feel? Claire asked. Terrifying, Ethan admitted. But also, He paused, searching for the right word. Real. It feels real. That's because you are real, Claire said. You're not just Emma's dad or Marcus's old friend or the guy who got left behind. You're Ethan, and maybe it's time you let yourself remember that. The DJ announced the father-daughter dance, and Ethan watched Marcus take the floor with his mother, both of them laughing at something. A pang of longing hit him, not for what he didn't have, but for what he did. Emma should be here to see this. Emma, who'd pushed him to come tonight even though she knew how much he hated these events. I need to call my daughter, he said suddenly, pulling out his phone. Go, Claire said. I'll be here. Ethan stepped out onto the terrace, the cool night air a relief after the warmth of the reception hall. He dialed Emma's number and she picked up on the second ring. Dad, is everything okay? Everything's fine, he assured her. I just wanted to hear your voice. You're not leaving early, are you? Emma's tone turned suspicious. Dad, you promised you'd stay. I'm staying, Ethan said, surprising himself. I wanted to thank you. For what? For pushing me to come tonight. For always pushing me to do things that scare me. He leaned against the terrace railing, looking up at the stars. You're growing up, Em, and I think I've been so focused on being your dad that I forgot how to be anything else. Dad, Emma's voice softened. You know that's okay, right? Like, I know you gave up a lot for me, but I want you to have a life too, not just work and parent-teacher conferences. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just noticed. He could hear the smile in her voice. Is the wedding terrible? It's actually not terrible, Ethan admitted. I met someone. Just a friend, he added quickly. Someone at my table. She's interesting. A woman? Emma's voice pitched up with interest. Don't start. I'm not starting. I'm just saying it's nice that you're talking to someone who isn't me or Uncle Marcus or the guys at work. They talked for a few more minutes before Emma had to go, movie night with her best friend Sarah. After hanging up, Ethan stood on the terrace for a moment longer, letting the evening settle around him. When he returned inside, Claire looked up from her phone with a raised eyebrow. Everything okay? Yeah. Ethan sat back down, feeling something shift inside him. A small crack in the wall he'd built, letting in light. My daughter wanted to make sure I wasn't bailing. Smart kid. She is. Ethan paused, then added, She said I should have a life beyond being her dad. Also smart, Claire observed, though in my experience, it's easier to say than to actually do. How do you even start? The question came out more vulnerable than Ethan intended. After spending so long defined by one role, how do you figure out who you are without it? Claire was quiet for a moment, considering. I think you start by showing up, by saying yes to things that scare you, by sitting at back tables with strangers and having honest conversations. She met his eyes. By staying even when every instinct tells you to run. Is that what you're doing? Ethan asked. Figuring out who you are? Every day, Claire admitted. Some days are better than others, but I'm trying, and I think that counts for something. The music shifted again, slower now. Couples filled the dance floor, swaying together in the dim light. Ethan watched them with less pain than before, less of that hollow ache that usually accompanied witnessing intimacy he didn't have. Do you dance? Claire asked suddenly. The question caught him off guard. I used to, not in a long time. Me neither. She stood, extending her hand. Want to be terrible at it together? Ethan stared at her hand, his heart suddenly pounding. It was just a dance. Just one dance at a wedding with a woman he'd met a few hours ago. Nothing more. Except it felt like more. It felt like a choice. A small, terrifying step towards something beyond the walls he'd built. I'm really out of practice, he warned, taking her hand. Good thing I don't care, Claire said. They made their way to the edge of the dance floor, not quite in the center, but no longer hiding at the back table either. Claire placed one hand on his shoulder, and Ethan rested his other hand lightly on her waist, the formal distance of people who barely knew each other. Fair warning, Claire said as they began to move. I have no rhythm. Fair warning back, Ethan replied. I'm probably going to step on your feet. Then we're evenly matched. They swayed more than danced, awkward and uncertain, but somehow comfortable in their shared inexperience. Around them, other couples moved with practiced ease, but Ethan found he didn't care. For the first time in 15 years, he wasn't watching other people's lives from the outside. He was living his own. "Thank you," he said after a moment. "For what?" "For sitting at table 12, for being honest, for not letting me disappear tonight." Claire's expression softened. "Thank you for letting me help, for talking to me like a real person instead of treating me like a threat or a project." "Why would I treat you like a threat?" "Because I'm direct and I don't apologize for taking up space," Claire said simply. "A lot of people find that threatening." "I find it refreshing," Ethan admitted. "Most people dance around what they really mean. You just say it." "Life's too short for anything else." The song ended, transitioning into something more upbeat. They stepped apart, the brief moment of closeness ending naturally. "Want to go back to the safety of table 12? Claire asked. "Actually," Ethan said, surprising himself again, "I think I'd like to stay out here, if you want to keep dancing." Claire's smile was genuine, reaching her eyes. "I want to keep dancing." So they did. Through 3 more songs, neither of them particularly skilled, but both committed to the attempt. Other people danced around them. Some Ethan recognized and nodded to, others complete strangers. And for the first time in longer than he could remember, Ethan Cole wasn't counting the minutes until he could leave. He was just there, present, alive. The wedding reception wound down around midnight, guests filtering out in pairs and groups, their laughter echoing across the parking lot. Ethan stood near his truck, keys in hand, but not quite ready to leave. Claire stood beside him, her heels dangling from one hand, looking up at the clear September sky. "That was unexpected," she said finally. "Which part?" Ethan asked. "The public toast, the dancing, or the fact that I didn't run screaming 2 hours ago?" "All of it." Claire turned to face him, her expression thoughtful in the amber glow of the parking lot lights. "But mostly the part where we both had a surprisingly decent time." "I did," Ethan admitted. "Have a decent time, I mean." "I wasn't expecting that." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the kind that had developed over the course of the evening, the absence of pressure to fill every gap with words. Around them, car engines started, taillights flared red in the darkness. "So what happens now?" Claire asked, her directness still somehow managing to catch him off guard. "Do we exchange numbers and pretend we'll stay in touch? Or do we acknowledge that this was a nice moment and leave it at that?" Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. In the parking lot light, with her hair slightly mussed from dancing and her makeup faded, she looked real. Not polished or performing, just herself. It was the most attractive thing he'd seen in years. "I'd like your number," he said. "If that's okay." "You're sure?" Claire's tone wasn't challenging, just checking. "Because I meant what I said earlier. I don't need rescuing or fixing or whatever narrative people like to create. If you're looking for someone who'll complete you or make you whole, or any of that romantic movie bullshit, I'm not your person." "Good," Ethan said. "Because I'm not looking for that either. But I'd like to talk to you again. Maybe get coffee. Maybe just text occasionally. No expectations beyond that." Claire studied his face for a long moment, then nodded. "Okay. But fair warning, I'm terrible at texting back, and I work weird hours. And sometimes I need a lot of space." "I have a teenage daughter and run my own business," Ethan countered. "I understand weird hours and needing space." They exchanged phones, entering contact information with the careful attention of people who weren't quite sure what they were starting, but knew they didn't want it to end yet. When Claire handed his phone back, her fingers brushed his briefly. "Drive safe, Ethan Cole," she said. "You too, Claire Monroe." He watched her walk to her car, a sensible sedan parked 3 rows over. She didn't look back, didn't wave, just got in and drove away with the same straightforward efficiency she seemed to apply to everything. Ethan stood by his truck for another minute, turning his phone over in his hands, looking at her contact information on the screen. Then he drove home, the roads empty and dark, his mind replaying the evening in fragments, the weight of Marcus's toast, the steady presence of Claire's hand on his arm, the awkward grace of dancing after 15 years of deliberate stillness. The house was dark when he pulled into the driveway, but he could see a lamp still burning in Emma's bedroom window. She'd waited up. His chest tightened with affection and guilt in equal measure. She shouldn't have to worry about him like this. He let himself in quietly, setting his keys on the kitchen counter. Before he could head upstairs, Emma appeared at the top of the staircase wearing pajama pants and an oversized hoodie, her dark hair pulled into a messy bun. "You're back," she said, trying to sound casual and failing completely. "How was it?" "Come down," Ethan said. "I'll make tea." It was their ritual. Had been since Emma was 12 and had started staying up late worrying about things she wouldn't name during daylight hours. Ethan would make chamomile tea with honey, and they'd sit at the kitchen table, and eventually she'd tell him what was really bothering her. He'd never expected the ritual to reverse, for her to be the one waiting up for him. Emma patted down the stairs and slid into her usual chair while Ethan filled the kettle. "So?" she prompted. "Details." "It was fine," Ethan said, pulling 2 mugs from the cabinet. "Marcus looked happy. The food was good. I didn't embarrass myself." "Dad?" Emma's tone was patient but firm. "You stayed until midnight. You never stay anywhere until midnight unless I'm competing in something. What happened?" The kettle began to whistle. Ethan poured water over tea bags, watching the steam rise, considering how much to share. "Marcus gave a toast," he said finally. "About me. In front of everyone." "Oh no," Emma breathed. "What did he say?" "That I was a good father. That watching me raise you taught him what commitment really meant." Ethan brought the mugs to the table, settling into the chair across from his daughter. "It was a lot." Emma's eyes shimmered slightly in the kitchen light. "That must have been hard." "It was terrifying," Ethan admitted, "but also kind of okay. There was this woman at my table, Claire. She helped me get through it." "The woman you mentioned on the phone?" Emma leaned forward, suddenly very interested. "Tell me about her." "There's not much to tell. We just talked, danced a little. She's interesting." "Interesting how?" "She's direct. Honest. She doesn't pretend to be something she's not." Ethan wrapped his hands around his mug, feeling the warmth seep into his palms. "She lost her mother 2 years ago after being a caretaker for 7 years. She understands what it's like to build your life around someone else's needs." Emma was quiet for a moment, her tea forgotten. "Are you going to see her again?" "Maybe. We exchanged numbers, no plans yet. But you want to?" The question was simple, but the answer felt complicated. Ethan thought about Claire standing in the parking lot, her directness, her refusal to need anything from him. "Yeah," he said finally. "I think I do." "Good," Emma said firmly. "You should." I'm not looking for I know. You're not looking for anything serious. You're not trying to replace mom or whatever." Emma rolled her eyes with all the exasperation of a teenager who'd heard this speech before. "But Dad, you're allowed to have friends. You're allowed to have a life that isn't just work and me." "You are my life," Ethan said quietly. "I know." Emma's voice softened. "And that's beautiful, and also kind of a lot of pressure, you know? Like, what happens when I go to college in 3 years? What happens when I move out and start my own life? Are you just going to sit here alone in this house forever?" The words hit harder than Ethan expected. He'd been so focused on getting through each day, each year, that he hadn't let himself think about what came after. About the moment Emma wouldn't need him anymore, wouldn't be the center of everything. "I don't know," he admitted. "I haven't thought that far ahead." "Maybe you should start," Emma said gently. "And maybe this Claire person is a good place to begin. Just as friends, if that's all it is. But Dad, you need people in your life besides me." They finished their tea and quieter conversation, Emma telling him about the movie she'd watched with Sarah, Ethan listening with half his attention while the other half churned through everything his daughter had said. When Emma finally headed back to bed, kissing his cheek on her way past, Ethan sat alone at the kitchen table for a long time. His phone sat in front of him, Claire's contact information still displayed on the screen. He could text her. Just something simple, letting her know he'd gotten home safely. But what if she was already asleep? What if she'd changed her mind? What if... He was catastrophizing. Emma called it that, had learned the term in health class and applied it liberally to his tendency to imagine worst-case scenarios. Ethan took a breath and typed before he could overthink it further. Made it home. Thanks for making tonight bearable. Ethan. He hit send before he could delete and revise it 17 times. The message showed as delivered, but no immediate response came, which was fine. Normal, even. People didn't just sit around waiting for texts from virtual strangers at 1 in the morning. Ethan headed upstairs to his own room, the house settling into familiar nighttime sounds around him. He changed out of his suit, hanging it carefully in the closet. When was the last time he'd worn it? Emma's 8th grade graduation, maybe? He pulled on old sweatpants and a t-shirt, washed his face, brushed his teeth. Normal routine, normal night. Except his phone buzzed just as he was climbing into bed. Bearable is generous. You made it almost pleasant. Get some sleep. Claire. Ethan stared at the message, a smile tugging at his mouth. No emoji, no unnecessary punctuation, just Claire's straightforward honesty. He typed back. Almost pleasant. I'll take it. You too. This time he didn't wait for a response, just plugged in his phone and turned off the light. But he lay awake for a while in the darkness, thinking about dancing with Claire, about Marcus's toast, about Emma's words at the kitchen table, about the possibility that maybe, just maybe, his life could be more than the narrow corridor he'd built for himself 15 years ago. The next morning arrived too early, sunlight streaming through his bedroom window with cheerful insistence. Ethan groaned, checking his phone out of habit. 7:30. Sunday morning. No work calls, no urgent texts, just a message from Claire sent at 6:45. Coffee this week? I know a place that's quiet. Wednesday afternoon? Ethan read the message 3 times, his heart doing something complicated in his chest. Wednesday was 4 days away. He could prepare himself, figure out what to say, how to act, or he could just show up and talk to her like he had at the wedding, honest and present and himself. Wednesday works. What time? Her response came quickly. 2 p.m. I'll text you the address. Fair warning, their coffee is mediocre, but nobody bothers you there. Sounds perfect. Downstairs, he could hear Emma moving around the kitchen, the familiar sounds of cabinet doors opening and closing, the microwave beeping. He pulled on jeans and a flannel shirt, padding downstairs to find his daughter making scrambled eggs for both of them. Since when do you cook breakfast? He asked, touched. Since you came home from a wedding looking less miserable than you have in years. And I want to celebrate, Emma said, dividing eggs onto 2 plates. Also, I'm hungry, and you were still asleep. They ate at the kitchen table, morning light pouring through the windows, the Sunday paper spread between them. Comfortable. Familiar. But underneath, Ethan felt something shifting, the awareness that this wouldn't last forever, that Emma was right about needing to build a life beyond these quiet mornings. I'm meeting Claire for coffee on Wednesday, he said, surprising himself with the announcement. Emma's face lit up. Really? That's great, Dad. It's just coffee, as friends. You've said that 3 times now, Emma observed, which makes me think you're trying to convince yourself more than me. When did you get so perceptive? I've been perceptive since I was 6. You're just noticing. Emma took a bite of toast, studying him over the rim of her orange juice glass. Are you nervous? Terrified, Ethan admitted. Why? Because I don't remember how to do this. How to be around someone who isn't you, or a client, or someone I've known for 20 years. I don't know what to talk about, how to act, what she expects. Dad? Emma reached across the table, placing her hand over his. Just be yourself, the same person you were at the wedding. That's clearly who she wants to have coffee with. What if I mess it up? Then you mess it up, Emma said simply. But at least you tried. And honestly, after watching you avoid any kind of social life for my entire existence, I'm just proud you're going at all. The words were teasing but kind, and Ethan felt his anxiety settle slightly. Emma was right. Again. He didn't need to be perfect or charming or anything other than himself. Claire had been clear about what she wanted. Honesty, directness, no pretense. The days until Wednesday crawled past with agonizing slowness. Ethan threw himself into work, meeting with contractors about a new housing development, reviewing blueprints, managing his crew. But his mind kept wandering to Wednesday afternoon, to coffee with Claire, to the terrifying prospect of continuing whatever had started at Marcus's wedding. Tuesday evening, Emma caught him standing in front of his closet, staring at his limited selection of casual clothes with the intensity of someone defusing a bomb. "It's coffee, not a state dinner," she said from his doorway. "Just wear what you'd normally wear." "I normally wear work clothes covered in sawdust," Ethan pointed out. "Okay, fair. Wear the blue Henley. It looks good on you and doesn't look like you're trying too hard." "How do you know these things?" "Because unlike you, I have friends and occasionally go places," Emma said, pulling the shirt from his closet and tossing it to him. "Trust me, blue Henley, dark jeans, your good boots, you'll be fine." Wednesday arrived with cloudless skies and temperatures warm enough that Ethan questioned whether he needed a jacket. He settled for just the Henley Emma had suggested, feeling exposed and obvious without his usual layers. At 1:45, he climbed into his truck and pulled up the address Claire had sent. The coffee shop was tucked into a quiet neighborhood 15 minutes from his house, the kind of place he'd driven past 100 times without noticing. Small, unassuming, with mismatched furniture visible through the front windows. He parked and sat for a moment, hands on the steering wheel, breathing. "You can do this," he muttered to himself. "It's just coffee, just conversation. You managed it at the wedding. You can manage it now." Claire was already inside when he entered, seated at a corner table with 2 cups already waiting. She looked up as he approached, a slight smile crossing her face. "You're early," she said. "So are you." "I'm always early. Habit from too many years of scheduling my life around someone else's medical appointments." She gestured to the cup across from her. "Black coffee, right? That's what you drank at the wedding." "Good memory." Ethan sat down, wrapping his hands around the warm cup. The coffee shop was nearly empty. An older man reading a newspaper by the window, a college student typing intently on a laptop in the opposite corner, no one paying them any attention. "So," Claire said, "how was the post-wedding come down?" "Surprisingly okay," Ethan said. "Emma was proud of me for staying, made me tea, and gave me a lecture about building a life beyond being her parent. Smart kid." "She is. Sometimes I think she's raising me instead of the other way around." Ethan took a sip of coffee. Claire was right. It was mediocre. But the space was quiet, the atmosphere comfortable. "How about you?" "Spent 2 hours on Sunday fielding texts from Jennifer's mother about how lovely it was to meet me, and did I know her neighbor's son was also single and very successful." Claire's expression was wry. Apparently sitting at table 12 together means we're both desperate projects in need of matchmaking intervention. "Did you tell her off?" "Politely," Claire said. "I've learned that being direct doesn't mean being cruel. But yes, I made it clear that my relationship status is not a problem requiring her solution." Ethan found himself relaxing into the conversation the same way he had at the wedding. Claire asked about his work, and he found himself talking about the housing development, the challenges of managing crews, the satisfaction of watching a project come together from bare ground to finished homes. She told him about a complicated contract dispute she was mediating, the absurdity of corporate legal language, the strange satisfaction of finding the exact right phrase to resolve weeks of deadlock. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked. "Contract law?" "I'm good at it," Claire said, which isn't quite the same thing as liking it, but it pays well. I work for myself, and I get to tell people when they're being idiots in professionally acceptable terms. That counts for something. "What would you do if you could do anything?" The question seemed to catch her off guard. Claire was quiet for a moment, turning her coffee cup between her hands. "I don't know," she admitted finally. "For so long, my life was about caregiving. Then it was about rebuilding financial stability after medical bills and funeral costs. I haven't let myself think about what I actually want beyond survival." "I get that," Ethan said quietly. "More than you know." "So what about you?" Claire turned the question back on him. "If you could do anything, what would it be?" Ethan opened his mouth to give his standard answer, that he loved his work, that building things satisfied him, that he had everything he needed. But Claire's direct gaze stopped him. She'd know if he was deflecting. "I'd want time," he said instead. "Time to think about something other than the next deadline or the next expense or whether Emma's okay. Time to read books that aren't about construction codes. Time to just exist without purpose for a while." "That sounds nice," Claire said. "Also impossible." "Yeah." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. the weight of mutual understanding settling between them. The college student packed up their laptop and left. The older man turned a page of his newspaper. The world continued around them while they existed in this small pocket of honesty. "Can I ask you something?" Claire said eventually. "About your wife." Ethan tensed reflexively, but forced himself to stay present. "Okay." "Do you hate her?" The question was so unexpected that Ethan actually laughed. "No, I did for a while, was angry, bitter, all of that. But honestly, I mostly just feel nothing now. She's a person who made a choice I wouldn't have made. End of story." "Do you know where she is?" "California, last I heard. Remarried. Has other kids." Ethan shrugged. "She sends Emma a birthday card every year. Emma sends polite thank you texts back. It's cordial and distant, and that's fine." "Does Emma want more from her?" "She says no. But I wonder sometimes if she feels like she can't want more because it would hurt me." Ethan stared into his coffee. "That's the thing nobody tells you about single parenting. You become so intertwined with your kid's emotional landscape that it's hard to know where your feelings end and theirs begin." Claire nodded slowly. "My mother used to say that loving someone meant letting them have their own pain, not trying to fix it or take it away, just acknowledging it exists separately from you. That's hard." "It is. I was terrible at it. Spent 7 years trying to manage her pain instead of just sitting with her in it." Claire's voice was quiet but steady. "I'm still learning how to let people carry their own weight without jumping in to help." "Is that why you were so insistent at the wedding about not needing rescue?" Ethan asked. "Partly, but also because I spent too many years being the person who rescued everyone else. I don't want to be on either end of that dynamic anymore." "So what do you want?" Claire met his eyes, her expression thoughtful. "I want to figure out who I am when I'm not defined by what I do for other people. I want to take up space without apologizing. I want to have conversations with people who don't expect me to perform or fix or save anything." She paused. "I want to have more mediocre coffee with someone who doesn't make me feel like I have to be anything other than exactly what I am." Something warm unfurled in Ethan's chest. "I'd like that too." They stayed at the coffee shop until after 4, talking about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, the strange experience of rebuilding identity after years of self-erasure. When they finally left, stepping out into the late afternoon sunlight, Ethan felt lighter than he had in years. "Same time next week?" Claire asked, pulling her keys from her bag. "Yeah," Ethan said. "Definitely." They parted ways in the parking lot, and Ethan drove home with his mind full of Claire's words, her honesty, the easy rhythm of their conversation. When he walked through his front door, Emma looked up from her homework spread across the kitchen table. "How'd it go?" she asked, trying and failing to sound casual. "It went well," Ethan said. "We're meeting again next week." Emma's smile was bright enough to light the room. "I'm proud of you, Dad." "For drinking mediocre coffee." "For showing up," Emma said simply. "For letting yourself have this." That night, after Emma had gone to bed and the house had settled into quiet darkness, Ethan's phone buzzed with a message from Claire. "Thank you for today. For being exactly who you are. Same time next Wednesday?" Ethan typed back with steady hands and something close to hope building in his chest. Wouldn't miss it. The Wednesday coffee meetings became a rhythm Ethan didn't realize he'd been missing. Week after week, he and Claire met at the same unassuming coffee shop, sitting at the same corner table, talking about everything that mattered and nothing that required pretense. By the 4th week of October, Ethan found himself looking forward to Wednesdays with an anticipation that both thrilled and unnerved him. Emma noticed, of course. She noticed everything. "You're humming," she said one Tuesday evening, looking up from her chemistry homework with undisguised amusement. "I don't hum," Ethan protested, though he immediately stopped the tuneless melody he hadn't realized he'd been producing. "You've been humming for 3 days," Emma informed him, "and you keep checking your phone like you're waiting for something important." "I'm not—" Ethan stopped, caught. "Claire and I are meeting tomorrow, that's all." "That's all?" Emma repeated, her tone suggesting she knew exactly how significant that all had become. "Dad, you know it's okay if this is more than just coffee, right?" "It's not more than coffee," Ethan said, but the words felt hollow even as he spoke them. "We're friends. We talk. That's it." Friends who see each other every single week without fail, Emma pointed out. Friends who text each other random things at weird hours. Friends who make each other smile in ways I haven't seen you smile in my entire life. Ethan set down the construction invoice he'd been reviewing, giving his daughter his full attention. I'm not looking for a relationship. I told you that. I know what you told me, Emma said patiently. But maybe what you're looking for and what you're actually building aren't the same thing. And maybe that's okay. The conversation stayed with Ethan through the next morning, through work meetings and phone calls until he found himself once again pulling into the coffee shop parking lot at 1:55. Claire's car was already there, and through the window he could see her at their usual table, reading something on her phone. When he walked in, she looked up and smiled. The real one, not the polite version she used with strangers. "You're 3 minutes early today. New record." "Traffic was light," Ethan said, settling into his chair. "You already got the coffee?" "And a blueberry muffin to share because I've decided we need to acknowledge that sitting here for 2 hours every week on just mediocre coffee is doing terrible things to my stomach lining." Claire pushed a plate with a muffin torn in half across the table. "Consider it a public health intervention." Ethan took his half, touched by the casual intimacy of the gesture. How long had it been since someone thought about his comfort like this? "Emma thinks we're more than friends," he said, surprising himself with the directness. Claire's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. "What do you think?" "I think I don't know how to define what this is," Ethan admitted. "I know I look forward to seeing you. I know talking to you makes everything else make more sense. I know that when something happens, good or bad, you're one of the first people I want to tell about it." "That sounds like more than friends to me," Claire said quietly. "But I also understand why that's complicated." "Is it complicated for you?" Claire was quiet for a moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "Yes," she said finally, "because I like you, Ethan, more than I expected to. And that terrifies me because I spent so many years having my entire identity wrapped up in someone else's needs. I swore I wouldn't do that again." "I'm not asking you to," Ethan said quickly. "I would never ask you to give up any part of yourself for me." "I know, that's part of why this is so terrifying." Claire met his eyes. "You're the first person I've met who doesn't seem to want me to be anything other than exactly what I am, and I don't know what to do with that." Ethan reached across the table, his hand covering hers. The touch was simple, brief, but it sent warmth through his entire chest. "We don't have to do anything with it," he said. "We can just let it be what it is." "And what is it?" "I have no idea," Ethan admitted. "But I know I don't want it to stop." Claire turned her hand over, her fingers briefly lacing with his before pulling back. "Neither do I. But Ethan, I need you to understand something. I'm not good at this. At relationships, at opening up, at any of it. I'm going to mess up. I'm going to need space sometimes. I'm going to be terrible at the romantic gestures and remembering important dates and all the things people are supposed to do." "Good," Ethan said. "Because I haven't been on a date in 15 years. I have a teenage daughter who's going to have opinions about everything. I work 70-hour weeks sometimes, and I'm so out of practice at this that I don't even know what this is supposed to look like anymore." A smile tugged at Claire's mouth. "So we're both disasters." "Completely." "Want to be disasters together?" The question hung in the air between them, weighted with possibility and fear and something that felt dangerously close to hope. Ethan thought about Emma's words, about building something without meaning to, about the difference between what he thought he wanted and what he was actually creating. "Yeah," he said, "I really do." They stayed at the coffee shop longer than usual that day, the conversation shifting from careful confession to easier territory. Claire's ongoing battle with her neighbor's aggressive landscaping choices, Ethan's struggles managing a crew member who was talented but chronically late. But underneath the ordinary topics, something had changed. A line had been crossed, a possibility acknowledged. When they finally left, walking out into the crisp October afternoon, Claire stopped beside her car. "So what now?" "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "What's the protocol here?" "There isn't one. We're making this up as we go." Claire pulled her jacket tighter against the autumn breeze. "But maybe we could do something other than coffee next time? Not a date," she added quickly. "Just something different." "Like what?" There's a farmer's market on Saturday mornings. I go sometimes to get vegetables that aren't wrapped in plastic and judged by their appearance alone. Want to come with me? The invitation was casual, almost throwaway, but Ethan heard the vulnerability underneath it. Claire was inviting him into her actual life, not just their carefully contained Wednesday afternoons. I'd like that, he said. What time? 9. I'll text you the address. Saturday morning arrived cold and bright, the first real hint of approaching winter in the air. Emma was still asleep when Ethan left, but she'd stayed up late the night before asking questions about Claire with an intensity that suggested she was much more invested in this development than she was letting on. Just be yourself, she'd finally said, echoing her earlier advice. And Dad? Maybe let yourself actually enjoy this instead of catastrophizing everything that could go wrong. The farmer's market was set up in a church parking lot. Rows of vendors selling everything from fresh produce to handmade soap to locally roasted coffee that definitely put their usual coffee shop to shame. Claire was waiting by the entrance, wearing jeans and a thick sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back like usual. You made it, she said, falling into step beside him as they entered the market. Fair warning, I take my vegetable selection very seriously. There will be extensive squash examination. I can handle that, Ethan said, amused. They moved through the market slowly, Claire stopping to inspect tomatoes with the focus of a jeweler examining diamonds, discussing the merits of different apple varieties with a farmer who clearly knew her by name. Ethan found himself relaxing into the rhythm of it, carrying her growing canvas bag of purchases, offering opinions when asked, mostly just enjoying watching her interact with the world around her. You do this every week? He asked as she deliberated between 2 bunches of kale. Most weeks. It's my Saturday morning ritual, farmer's market, then home to actually cook something instead of eating granola bars over the sink like I do the rest of the week. She selected 1 bunch, added it to the bag. Do you cook? I can manage the basics, Ethan said. Pasta, grilled chicken, things that won't poison a teenager. Nothing fancy. Fancy is overrated, Claire said. I just like knowing where my food comes from. Talking to the people who grew it. It feels more real than fluorescent grocery store aisles. They stopped at a coffee vendor getting cups of something that actually tasted like coffee should taste, and found a bench at the edge of the market. Around them, families wandered past, couples pushed strollers, dogs strained at leashes toward interesting smells. Can I ask you something? Claire said, cradling her coffee cup between her hands. About Emma's mother. You can ask me anything, Ethan said, meaning it. Did you see it coming when she left? Ethan was quiet for a moment, thinking back to those final weeks before Sarah walked out. Yes and no, he said finally. I knew she was unhappy, knew she wasn't adjusting well to motherhood, but I thought we'd work through it. I thought if I just tried harder, supported her more, gave her space when she needed it, she'd eventually bond with Emma. He took a sip of coffee. Turns out you can't make someone want a life they don't want. Did she ever say why? She said motherhood made her feel like she was disappearing, that every time she looked at Emma, she saw her own life ending. She said she never wanted to be a mother, never wanted any of it, and staying would destroy her. The words still hurt to repeat, even after all these years. The worst part was, I understood. Not the leaving Emma part. I'll never understand that. But the feeling of being consumed by someone else's needs? I get that now more than I did then. Do you resent her? Claire asked quietly. For leaving me? No. For leaving Emma? Ethan's jaw tightened. Yeah, Emma deserved better than a mother who saw her as an obstacle instead of a person. But I also can't change it, so I try not to dwell there. Claire nodded slowly. My father left when I was 8. Just didn't come home one day. My mother never talked about him, never explained, never processed any of it. She just carried on like he'd never existed. And I think that silence, that refusal to acknowledge the loss, that damaged me more than the actual leaving. Is that why you're so direct about everything? Ethan asked. Because you grew up with too much silence? Probably, Claire admitted. I decided early on that I'd rather be uncomfortably honest than comfortably numb. Hasn't always served me well, but at least I know I'm living my actual life instead of some performed version of it. I think that's brave, Ethan said. You're one to talk. You've spent 15 years being both parents to a kid who didn't ask for any of this. That's not brave? That's just survival. Survival is brave, Claire said firmly, especially when you could have made different choices, easier choices. They finished their coffee in comfortable silence, watching the market flow around them. Eventually, Claire checked her phone and sighed. I should get this stuff home before the lettuce wilts into sadness. I'll walk you to your car, Ethan said. They made their way back through the market, Claire stopping once more to grab fresh bread from a baker she clearly knew well. At her car, she loaded the canvas bag into her trunk, then turned to face him. Thank you for coming, she said. I wasn't sure how this would feel, bringing you into my regular life instead of keeping things contained to Wednesday afternoons. How does it feel? Ethan asked. Good, Claire said simply. Really good. Scary, but good. Yeah, Ethan agreed. I know that feeling. Claire hesitated for just a moment, then stepped forward and hugged him. It was brief, somewhat awkward. They were both clearly out of practice, but genuine. When she pulled back, her cheeks were slightly flushed. Okay, text me later? I will, Ethan promised. He watched her drive away, then stood in the parking lot for a long moment, processing. He'd just spent 2 hours at a farmer's market examining vegetables and drinking good coffee, and it had been one of the best mornings he could remember in years. When had his life become so small that something this ordinary felt revolutionary? His phone buzzed with a text from Emma. How's the market? Did you buy vegetables you'll actually eat or just ones that look good? Ethan smiled, typing back, Didn't buy any vegetables, just helped Claire with hers. Emma's response came quickly. That's even better. Proud of you, Dad. The next week brought unexpected complications. A major project Ethan had been managing hit snags, permit issues, a contractor who backed out last minute, weather delays that pushed everything back by weeks. He worked late every night, barely saw Emma except for hurried breakfasts before she left for school, and almost canceled Wednesday coffee with Claire 3 times before forcing himself to keep the commitment. When he walked into the coffee shop that afternoon, Claire took one look at his face and said, Rough week? You could say that, Ethan admitted, dropping into his chair with less grace than usual. Everything that could go wrong with this housing project has gone wrong. I'm hemorrhaging money, my crew is frustrated, and I'm pretty sure I'm about 2 days away from just burning the whole thing down and walking away. But you won't, Claire said, pushing his coffee toward him. No, but I want to. Tell me about it, Claire said. Not the technical stuff, I won't understand that anyway. Just what it feels like. So Ethan did. He talked about the pressure of being responsible not just for the project, but for the families counting on those houses, for the crew members whose livelihoods depended on him keeping everything moving. He talked about the exhaustion of making decision after decision with no backup, no one to share the weight with. Claire listened without interrupting, without offering solutions, just present in his frustration. When he finally ran out of words, she said quietly, That sounds really hard. It is, Ethan said, and I know I should be grateful. I have a successful business, I'm providing for Emma, things could be so much worse. But sometimes I'm just tired of carrying everything alone. Those things can both be true, Claire said. You can be grateful and exhausted, successful and overwhelmed. It's not a binary. The simple validation made something loosen in Ethan's chest. Thank you, he said, for listening, for not trying to fix it. I'm terrible at fixing things anyway, Claire said, but I'm pretty good at sitting in the mess with people. They talked for another hour, the conversation eventually shifting to lighter topics. Emma's upcoming debate tournament, Claire's ongoing war with her HOA about her right to plant native wildflowers instead of traditional grass. By the time Ethan left, he felt steadier, more capable of handling whatever came next. That night, Emma found him in his home office reviewing blueprints for the 100th time. She knocked softly on the doorframe. Dad, can we talk? Ethan looked up, immediately concerned by her serious tone. Of course, what's wrong? Emma came in and sat on the small couch he kept for client meetings, pulling her knees up to her chest. Nothing's wrong exactly. I just wanted to ask you something. Okay, Ethan said carefully, giving her his full attention. Are you happy? Emma asked. Like, actually happy? Not just content or okay or managing? The question caught him completely off guard. What brought this on? I've been thinking about it a lot lately, Emma said. Watching you with Claire, seeing you smile more, hearing you hum random songs. You seem different, lighter, and it made me realize I'm not sure I've ever seen you actually happy before. Not in my whole life. Ethan's chest tightened. Raising you has made me happy. I know, Emma said quickly, but that's not what I mean. Like, you love me. I know that. But do you love your life? Do you wake up excited about anything? Do you have things that are just yours, that make you feel alive instead of just functional? The honesty of the question deserved an honest answer. Ethan thought about the past month, about Wednesday coffees and Saturday markets, about conversations that made him feel seen instead of just useful. I'm starting to, he admitted. For the first time in a long time, I'm starting to feel like maybe there's more to life than just getting through each day. Because of Claire? Emma asked. Partly, but also because of you pushing me to actually have a life, because of Marcus's wedding forcing me out of hiding, because I'm finally letting myself want things again instead of just surviving. Emma nodded slowly, processing. Can I tell you something without you getting defensive? I'll try. I think you've been punishing yourself for 15 years, Emma said quietly, for Mom leaving. Like if you just sacrificed enough, worked hard enough, disappeared enough, somehow that would prove you were worthy. But Dad, you were always worthy. You didn't deserve what she did. And you definitely don't deserve to spend your entire life paying for her choices. The words hit Ethan like a physical blow. He opened his mouth to protest, to deflect, but Emma's expression stopped him. When had his daughter become so perceptive? When had she started seeing through all his careful constructions? I don't know how to not do that, he admitted, his voice rough. How to not feel like I have to earn the right to exist. Maybe start with Claire, Emma suggested. Start with letting yourself have something good without questioning whether you deserve it. That conversation echoed in Ethan's mind through the following days. He found himself examining his own patterns, the way he always took the smallest portion at dinner, always gave Emma the better bedroom, always put his own needs last as though his comfort was somehow less important than everyone else's. When Saturday arrived, Claire texted him, "Farmer's market again? Or is that too routine?" Ethan typed back, "Actually, can I cook you dinner instead? At my place?" There was a long pause before her response came. "You sure? That's a bigger step than vegetables." "I'm sure, if you're comfortable with it." "What time?" 7. Emma will be here. She has a sleepover at 8, so it'll just be us after that." "Sounds good. What should I bring?" "Just yourself." Ethan spent Saturday afternoon cleaning the house with an intensity that made Emma laugh. "Dad, she's seen you covered in construction dust. I don't think she's going to judge you for a few dishes in the sink." "I want things to be nice," Ethan said, wiping down the kitchen counter for the third time. "They will be," Emma assured him. "Because she's coming to see you, not your housekeeping skills." At 6:45, Emma came downstairs dressed for her sleepover, backpack over her shoulder. "Okay, I'm heading to Sarah's. Her mom is picking me up in 5 minutes." "Have fun," Ethan said, then paused. "And Em, thank you for everything you said the other night." "You're welcome," Emma said, hugging him quickly. "Now relax. Make something edible. Talk to Claire like you actually like her instead of like she's a construction inspector. You've got this." She was gone before he could respond. The house suddenly very quiet. Ethan checked the roasted chicken in the oven, the vegetables he'd prepared following a recipe with probably more steps than necessary, the salad waiting in the refrigerator. Everything was ready. He was ready. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 o'clock. Ethan opened the door to find Claire standing on his porch, holding a bottle of wine and looking as nervous as he felt. "Hi," she said. "Hi," Ethan said. "Come in." She stepped inside, looking around with open curiosity. The house was modest but comfortable, lived in, full of Emma's presence in the photos on the walls, the debate team trophy on the bookshelf, the organized chaos that came from 15 years of single parenting. "This is nice," Claire said, genuine warmth in her voice. "It feels like a real home." "It's a little chaotic," Ethan said. Emma's stuff tends to expand to fill all available space. That's what makes it feel real, Claire said. She handed him the wine. I brought red because I assumed we weren't having fish, but if I guessed wrong, there's a white in my car. Red's perfect. I made chicken. They moved into the kitchen, falling into an easy rhythm as Ethan finished the final dinner preparations and Claire opened the wine. The conversation flowed naturally, Claire asking about the photos on the refrigerator, Ethan explaining Emma's various phases and interests, both of them carefully skirting around the significance of this moment. When they finally sat down to eat, the food was good if not spectacular, and the wine helped smooth any remaining awkwardness. They talked about Claire's week, about Ethan's ongoing project disasters, about everything except what was actually happening between them. Finally, over the remnants of dinner, Claire set down her wine glass and said, "Ethan, can we acknowledge that this is terrifying?" "Absolutely terrifying," Ethan agreed. "I haven't done this in years," Claire continued. "Haven't let someone this close. And I'm sitting here having a lovely time while also fighting the urge to find 17 reasons why this won't work and run before I get hurt." "Me too," Ethan admitted. "Every instinct I have is screaming that I'm going to mess this up, that you're going to realize I'm not worth the effort, that I should quit while I'm ahead." "So what do we do?" Claire asked. Ethan thought about Emma's words, about punishing himself, about 15 years of believing he didn't deserve good things. "We stay anyway," he said. "We acknowledge it's scary, and we stay anyway." Claire reached across the table, her hand covering his. "Yeah," she said quietly. "We stay anyway." They stayed at the table long after the food had gone cold, hands linked across the worn wood surface, neither quite willing to break the moment. Outside, darkness had settled fully over the neighborhood, the October night carrying the first real bite of winter. Inside Ethan's kitchen, with the soft overhead light creating a warm bubble against the encroaching cold, something profound was shifting. "I should probably help you clean up," Claire said eventually, though she made no move to pull her hand away. "Leave it," Ethan said. "I'll deal with it later." "You sure? I'm very good at washing dishes. It's basically my only domestic skill." "I'm sure." Ethan stood, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Want to move somewhere more comfortable? The living room has furniture that wasn't designed to torture people during long meals." Claire followed him into the living room, where a well-worn sectional faced a fireplace that Ethan actually used during winter months. The space was unmistakably lived in, throw blankets draped over the couch arms, a stack of Emma's textbooks on the coffee table, family photos covering one entire wall in mismatched frames that told the story of 15 years in fragments. Claire moved to the photo wall, studying each image with careful attention. Emma as a baby, red-faced and tiny in Ethan's arms. Emma missing her front teeth, holding up a soccer trophy. Emma at her 8th grade graduation, tall and almost unrecognizable from the infant in the earlier photos. And in every single one, Ethan, sometimes exhausted, sometimes caught mid-laugh, but always present. "There's not a single picture of just you," Claire observed quietly. Ethan looked at the wall, seeing it through her eyes. She was right. Every photo included Emma, was about Emma, centered Emma. "I'm usually the one taking the pictures," he said. "That's not why," Claire said, turning to face him. "You've erased yourself from your own story. You're in the photos, but only as Emma's father, never as Ethan." The observation struck too close to what Emma had said about him punishing himself for 15 years. "I don't know how to be anything else," Ethan admitted. For so long, being her dad was the only identity that mattered. "And now?" Claire asked. "Now I'm starting to remember there might be more." Ethan moved to the couch, suddenly exhausted by the weight of his own self-erasure. "Emma asked me this week if I was happy. Actually happy, not just managing, and I couldn't answer her." Claire sat beside him, close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Can you answer now?" Ethan thought about the question, really thought about it instead of deflecting. "I'm getting there," he said finally. "These past few weeks with you, I've felt something I haven't felt in years, like I'm allowed to exist, like my thoughts and feelings and wants matter beyond how they serve Emma or the business or anyone else." "They do matter," Claire said firmly. "They've always mattered. You just stopped believing it." "How do you know that?" Ethan asked. "We've only known each other a few months." "Because I did the same thing," Claire said. "Spent 7 years becoming invisible in my own life. My mother needed care, and that need consumed everything: my career, my friendships, any chance at a relationship. And I told myself it was noble, necessary, the right thing to do. But really, I think part of me was hiding, using caregiving as an excuse not to risk anything, not to be vulnerable, not to build a life that could fall apart. "Did you resent her?" Ethan asked quietly. Claire was silent for a long moment. "Sometimes," she admitted, "and then I'd feel guilty for resenting someone who was sick and suffering. It was this terrible cycle: sacrifice, resentment, guilt, more sacrifice. After she died, I thought I'd feel free. Instead, I felt lost. I didn't know who I was when I wasn't defined by taking care of her." "That's exactly how I feel when I think about Emma leaving for college," Ethan said. "She's got 3 years left, and then what? Who am I when I'm not getting her to soccer practice or helping with homework or making sure she eats something other than cereal for dinner?" "You're Ethan Cole," Claire said simply. "The man who builds houses and drinks mediocre coffee and is learning to take up space again. The man who showed up at a wedding even though it terrified him. The man who's brave enough to let someone see him." Ethan turned to face her fully, struck by the certainty in her voice. "You really believe that?" "I do," Claire said. "And I think deep down you're starting to believe it too. Otherwise you wouldn't have invited me here tonight." "I invited you because I wanted to see you," Ethan said. "Because Wednesday afternoons aren't enough anymore. Because I'm tired of keeping everything compartmentalized and safe." "What do you want instead?" The question hung between them, loaded with possibility and risk. Ethan could feel his heart hammering against his ribs, every instinct screaming at him to retreat, to protect himself, to maintain the careful distance that had kept him safe for 15 years. But he thought about Emma's words, about Claire's honesty, about the way she'd stood beside him at Marcus's wedding and refused to let him disappear. "I want this," he said, gesturing between them. "Whatever this is becoming, I want to stop being afraid of it." Claire's eyes searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. When she spoke, her voice was soft but steady. "I want that too. But Ethan, I need you to understand something. I'm going to be difficult sometimes. I'm going to need space and solitude in ways that might not make sense. I'm going to struggle with intimacy and vulnerability because I spent so many years teaching myself not to need anyone." "I spent 15 years doing the exact same thing," Ethan reminded her. "We're both out of practice at this." "So we figure it out together?" Claire asked. "Slowly?" "Very slowly," Ethan agreed. "No pressure, no expectations beyond just being honest with each other." Claire nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I can do honest. Honest I'm good at." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the magnitude of what they'd acknowledged settling around them. Then Claire shifted slightly, her hand finding his on the couch cushion between them. The touch was tentative, questioning. Ethan turned his hand over, lacing his fingers with hers. "This okay?" she asked. "More than okay," Ethan said. They stayed like that, hands linked, shoulders touching, neither quite ready to push further but unwilling to retreat. Eventually, Claire's head dipped to rest against his shoulder, and Ethan felt something in his chest crack open. Not breaking, but expanding, making room for feelings he'd kept carefully locked away for years. "Tell me something," Claire said after a while. "Something you've never told anyone else." Ethan thought about it, sifting through years of carefully guarded thoughts. "Sometimes I'm angry at Emma's mother," he admitted. "Not for leaving me, I'm over that, but for making me choose between giving Emma a complete family and preserving my own dignity. For putting me in a position where fighting for our marriage would have meant watching her resent Emma every single day. I'm angry that she didn't love our daughter enough to stay, and I'm angry that I'm grateful she left because Emma deserved better than a mother who saw her as a prison sentence." The words came out rough, years of suppressed frustration finally finding voice. Claire's hand tightened around his. "That's not a small thing to carry," she said quietly. "No," Ethan agreed, "but I've never said it out loud before. Never let myself fully acknowledge it because it felt like giving in to bitterness." "It's not bitter to acknowledge reality," Claire said. "Your anger doesn't diminish your love for Emma or the incredible job you've done raising her. Both things can exist." "What about you?" Ethan asked. "What's something you've never told anyone?" Claire was quiet for so long Ethan thought she might not answer. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "I was relieved when my mother died. Not happy. I loved her, but relieved. And the guilt from that relief almost destroyed me those first few months. I kept thinking I should be more devastated, should be falling apart, should be something other than just exhausted and empty and glad it was finally over. Did you ever tell anyone that? Ethan asked. No. Everyone expected me to be the grieving daughter, and I performed that role because it was easier than admitting the truth. That sometimes love and relief coexist. That you can mourn someone and still be grateful the burden is lifted. Thank you, Ethan said, for trusting me with that. Thank you for not judging it. They fell back into silence, but it was different now, weighted with shared confession, with the vulnerability of truths spoken aloud for the first time. Outside, a car drove past, its headlights briefly illuminating the living room before fading back into darkness. I should probably go, Claire said, though she made no move to stand. It's getting late. You could stay, Ethan said, then quickly added, on the couch, I mean, if you don't want to drive home. No expectations, just an offer. Claire lifted her head from his shoulder, studying his face. Are you sure? Yeah, Emma's gone for the night. There's a guest room upstairs with clean sheets, and honestly, I'm not ready for you to leave yet. Something soft crossed Claire's expression. Okay, she said. I'll stay. Ethan showed her to the guest room, apologizing for the fact that it doubled as his office and storage space. There's extra blankets in the closet if you get cold. Bathrooms across the hall. Help yourself to anything in the kitchen if you get hungry. Ethan, Claire said, stopping his nervous rambling with a hand on his arm. It's fine. Perfect, actually. Thank you. She stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Brief, warm, exactly the right amount of intimacy for where they were. Then she stepped back, closing the guest room door with a soft click that felt like punctuation on the evening. Ethan stood in the hallway for a moment, hand touching the spot where she'd kissed him, before heading to his own room. He lay awake for a long time, listening to the sounds of Claire settling in across the hall, thinking about everything that had been said and acknowledged and risked tonight. He woke the next morning to the smell of coffee brewing. Confused, he pulled on sweatpants and a t-shirt and headed downstairs to find Claire in his kitchen, already dressed, 2 mugs waiting on the counter. Morning, she said. Hope you don't mind. I raided your coffee supplies. I'm not functional before caffeine. Not at all, Ethan said, accepting the mug she offered. You sleep okay? Better than I have in months, actually, Claire admitted. Your guest bed is significantly more comfortable than my actual bed. They stood in the kitchen drinking coffee, the morning light streaming through the windows, everything feeling simultaneously normal and momentous. Claire had stayed the night in his house. Nothing had happened, but everything had shifted. What are your plans today? Ethan asked. Laundry, grocery shopping, the usual Sunday excitement, Claire said. You? Pretty much the same. Emma gets back around noon, then we usually do meal prep for the week together. Claire set down her empty mug, checking her phone. I should get going. Let you get back to your routine. Ethan walked her to the door, reluctant to see her leave, but unsure how to ask her to stay longer. On the porch, Claire turned to face him. Thank you for last night, she said. For dinner, for the conversation, for letting me stay, for trusting me with your honesty. Thank you for being someone I can be honest with, Ethan replied. She kissed him goodbye, a real kiss this time. Brief, but unmistakable, her lips soft against his. When she pulled back, her cheeks were slightly flushed. I'll text you, she said. I'll be waiting, Ethan replied. He watched her drive away, then stood on his porch in the cool November morning, touching his lips where she'd kissed him. 15 years. It had been 15 years since he'd kissed anyone, and he'd forgotten how it could make you feel simultaneously grounded and weightless. When Emma came home at noon, she took one look at his face and grinned. Something happened. Claire stayed for dinner, Ethan said, trying to sound casual. And? Emma prompted, dropping her overnight bag and sitting at the kitchen table with the expectant look of someone settling in for a full report. And we talked. A lot. She stayed over in the guest room because it got late. Dad. Emma's expression turned serious. Are you guys together? Like, actually together? Ethan sat across from her, thinking about how to explain something he barely understood himself. "We're figuring it out," he said finally, "taking it slow, learning how to be with someone after years of being alone." "But you like her," Emma stated rather than asked. "Yeah," Ethan admitted, "I really do." "Good," Emma said firmly. "You deserve this. You deserve to be happy and have someone who sees you and wants to be with you." "When did you get so wise?" Ethan asked, not for the first time. "I've always been wise. You're just finally listening." Over the next few weeks, Ethan and Claire fell into a new rhythm. Wednesday coffee continued, but now there were also Sunday farmers markets, occasional dinners at each other's places, long phone calls on random weeknights when one of them couldn't sleep. They moved slowly, carefully, both hyper-aware of their own damage and determined not to repeat old patterns. Emma watched it all with undisguised approval, occasionally offering unsolicited advice that was surprisingly insightful for a 15-year-old. "Just communicate," she'd say when Ethan was spiraling about some perceived misstep. "Tell her what you're thinking instead of assuming she'll figure it out." The advice served him well. When Claire needed space after a particularly difficult work week, she told him directly instead of pulling away without explanation. When Ethan felt overwhelmed by how quickly things were developing, he said so, and they consciously slowed down. The honesty that had defined their friendship became the foundation of whatever they were building now. Thanksgiving arrived with unexpected complications. Emma was spending the holiday with her mother in California. The first time in 5 years Sarah had made the effort to see her daughter. Emma had been nervous about it for weeks, and Ethan had worked hard to be supportive while privately dreading spending the holiday alone. "Come to my place," Claire said when he mentioned his plans to work through Thanksgiving. "I'm not doing anything special, but I'm making a small turkey and all the sides. It beats eating takeout alone." "You sure?" Ethan asked. "I don't want to impose on your day." "Ethan," Claire said with exaggerated patience, "I literally just invited you. That's the opposite of imposing." So Thanksgiving morning found Ethan standing on Claire's porch, holding a pumpkin pie he'd bought from the bakery and feeling more nervous than the situation warranted. This was just dinner, just two people who'd been seeing each other for 2 months, sharing a meal. Nothing momentous. Except it felt momentous. It felt like another line being crossed, another wall coming down. Claire opened the door wearing an apron over jeans and a sweater, her hair pulled back, a smudge of flour on her cheek. "You made it. Come in. I'm in the middle of catastrophic gravy that refuses to thicken." Her apartment was smaller than his house, but somehow felt more intentionally designed. Books everywhere, plants thriving in every available window, art on the walls that suggested careful curation. It felt like Claire, which meant it felt safe and honest and real. "Can I help with the gravy?" Ethan offered. "Only if you know some kind of gravy magic I don't," Claire said, leading him into the kitchen where chaos reigned. "I've added approximately 17 tablespoons of flour, and it's still basically soup." Ethan rolled up his sleeves and examined the situation. "You're cooking it on too high heat. Turn it down to medium-low and keep stirring. It'll thicken as it simmers." "How do you know that?" Emma went through a cooking phase when she was 12. Made me watch every episode of some competitive cooking show with her. I absorbed information through osmosis. They worked together in the kitchen, Claire trusting Ethan with the gravy while she basted the turkey and checked on various side dishes. The domestic intimacy of it felt natural, easy, like they'd been doing this for years instead of months. When everything was finally ready, they sat at Claire's small dining table, plates loaded with food that looked better than anything Ethan usually managed at home. Claire raised her water glass. "To surviving the holidays," she said, "and to not being alone while doing it." "I'll drink to that," Ethan agreed. They ate slowly, conversation flowing easily between bites. Claire told him about Thanksgivings growing up before her father left, loud, chaotic affairs with extended family crowding her mother's small house. Ethan shared memories of college Thanksgivings with Marcus before Sarah, before everything changed. "Do you think Emma's okay?" Claire asked. "With her mother, I mean?" "I hope so," Ethan said. "She texted this morning to say she got there safely. Haven't heard anything since, which either means she's having a great time or she's processing a lot." "That must be hard for you," Claire observed. "Letting her go, not knowing how it's affecting her." "It's torture," Ethan admitted. But she needs to figure out her relationship with Sarah on her own terms. I can't protect her from that disappointment, if that's what it ends up being. You're a good father, Claire said quietly, even when it costs you. They moved to the couch after dinner, too full for dessert, content to sit in comfortable silence while a football game played on muted television. Claire's head rested on Ethan's shoulder, his arm around her waist, more physical intimacy than they'd allowed themselves before, but it felt right for the day. Can I tell you something? Claire said eventually. Always, Ethan replied. I'm scared of how much I'm starting to need you, she admitted. I told myself I wouldn't do this again, wouldn't let someone become necessary to my happiness. But Ethan, these past 2 months, you've become the person I want to share things with, the person I think about when something happens. And that terrifies me because what if you leave? What if I've built something I can't survive losing? Ethan's chest tightened at the raw vulnerability in her voice. I'm scared too, he said, scared of messing this up, scared that I don't know how to be in a relationship anymore, scared that you'll realize I'm not worth the effort. You are worth it, Claire said fiercely, lifting her head to look at him. You're worth every risk, every fear, every moment of vulnerability. I just need you to believe that. I'm trying, Ethan said. Every day I'm trying. Claire kissed him then, deeper than before, her hands coming up to frame his face. Ethan responded without hesitation, 15 years of careful control dissolving in the face of wanting someone this much. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing harder, Claire's eyes were bright. Stay tonight, she said. Really stay. Not in the guest room. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. Are you sure? I'm terrified, Claire admitted, but I'm sure. Me too, Ethan said. On both counts. They stayed on the couch for a long time, kissing and talking and slowly discovering each other, taking it slow despite the urgency building between them. When they finally moved to Claire's bedroom, it was with trembling hands and nervous laughter and a tenderness that came from two people who'd both been alone too long. Afterwards, lying in the darkness with Claire curled against his chest, Ethan felt tears on his cheeks that he couldn't quite explain. Relief, maybe. Joy. The overwhelming realization that he was allowed to have this, to want this, to be fully present in his own life instead of just surviving it. You okay? Claire murmured, her hand finding his in the darkness. Yeah, Ethan said, his voice rough. I'm okay. Better than okay. Me too, Claire said softly. Me too. Ethan woke before dawn in Claire's bed, her breathing soft and steady beside him, and for the first time in 15 years didn't immediately catalog everything he needed to do that day. Instead, he let himself simply be present in the moment, the warmth of Claire's body against his, the pale light beginning to filter through her bedroom curtains, the profound quiet of a life expanding beyond the narrow boundaries he'd built around it. His phone buzzed on the nightstand, and he carefully reached for it, not wanting to wake Claire. A text from Emma. Happy Thanksgiving, Dad. Things here are okay. Mom's trying. Talk later? Relief flooded through him. Okay wasn't great, but it was honest. And Emma's willingness to share even that small update meant she wasn't shutting him out of whatever she was processing. Love you, Em. Call whenever you want, he typed back. Claire stirred beside him, her eyes opening slowly. What time is it? Just after 6, Ethan said softly. Go back to sleep. Can't, Claire murmured, stretching. I'm a morning person. It's terrible. She propped herself up on one elbow, studying his face in the dim light. You okay? No regrets? No regrets, Ethan said firmly. You? Just wondering why we waited so long, Claire admitted, a small smile playing at her lips. Though I suppose we both needed the time to get here. Yeah, Ethan agreed. I don't think I could have done this even a month ago. I wasn't ready. They lay in comfortable silence for a while, hands linked between them, before Claire finally pushed back the covers. Coffee? Please. Ethan pulled on his clothes from the night before while Claire disappeared into the bathroom. When he made his way to the kitchen, she was already there in an oversized sweatshirt and pajama pants, measuring coffee grounds with the focused intensity she brought to everything. So what's the protocol here? Ethan asked, leaning against the counter. The morning after, I'm completely out of practice. Me too, Claire admitted, starting the coffee maker. I think we just be honest about what we want. No games, no pretending. Okay, honest. Ethan took a breath. I don't want to leave. I want to stay here all day, have more of that pie we didn't eat last night, and just be with you. But I also don't want to assume that's what you want. Claire turned to face him, her expression soft. That's exactly what I want. No obligations, no performance, just us. They spent the day doing exactly that, eating leftover pie for breakfast, watching old movies on Claire's couch, talking about everything and nothing. Ethan told her about the housing project finally moving forward after weeks of delays. Claire shared her frustration with a client who kept changing contract terms and expecting her to absorb the extra work without compensation. Tell them no, Ethan said simply. It's not that easy. They're a major account, and I can't afford to lose the business. Can you afford to keep working for someone who doesn't respect your time? Ethan countered. Emma's debate coach told her once that people will treat you exactly as badly as you let them. Seems like that applies to business too. Claire was quiet for a moment, considering. When did you get so wise? I've been absorbing 15 years of parenting advice, Ethan said. Turns out most of it applies to regular life too. By late afternoon, Emma called. Ethan stepped out onto Claire's small balcony to take it, giving them both privacy. Hey, sweetheart, how's it going? It's weird, Dad, Emma said, her voice smaller than usual. Mom's nice. She's asking questions and acting interested in cooking meals. But it feels like she's trying too hard, like she's performing being a mother instead of actually being one. Ethan's chest tightened. He wanted to tell Emma that Sarah didn't deserve another chance, that she should protect herself, that she didn't owe her mother anything, but that wasn't his place. What do you want from this visit? He asked instead. I don't know, Emma admitted. I thought I wanted some big explanation, some reason that would make it make sense. But Dad, I don't think there is one. I think she just didn't want to be a mom, and no amount of talking is going to change that. I'm sorry, Em. That's a hard realization. The weird part is I'm not that upset about it, Emma said. Like, I've had a good life. You made sure of that. I don't feel like I'm missing something essential because she wasn't there. I'm just curious about her the same way I'd be curious about anyone who shares my DNA. Pride swelled in Ethan's chest. You're incredibly mature for 15. I've had a good example, Emma said, and he could hear the smile in her voice. So where are you? You sound different. Outside somewhere. I'm at Claire's, Ethan admitted. I stayed over last night after Thanksgiving dinner. There was a pause, then Emma's delighted squeal nearly deafened him. Dad, really? Like, stayed? Emma, I'm so happy for you, Emma interrupted, her voice bright with genuine joy. You deserve this so much. Is she there? Can I talk to her? She's inside, Ethan said. And let's maybe not make a big deal out of... Too late. It's a big deal, Emma declared. Tell Claire I approve. Tell her she better treat you right, or she'll answer to me. I'll pass along the message, Ethan said, laughing despite himself. When do you fly back? Sunday afternoon. Sarah's paying for the ticket, which is the least she can do. Emma's voice turned more serious. Dad, are you happy? Like really, truly happy? Yeah, Em, Ethan said, looking through the glass door to where Claire was visible on the couch, reading something on her phone. I really am. Good. You've earned it. After they hung up, Ethan stood on the balcony for another moment, watching the late November afternoon fade into early evening. Somewhere in California, his daughter was processing complicated emotions about her mother. Here in this moment, he was falling in love with someone who made him feel seen and valued and whole. Both things could be true. Both things could coexist. He went back inside to find Claire looking up at him with a raised eyebrow. Emma approves? Loudly, Ethan confirmed, sitting beside her. She also threatened you with bodily harm if you don't treat me right. I like her more by the minute, Claire said. She doing okay with her mom? Surprisingly, yes. She's processing the reality that Sarah can't give her what she needs, and she's okay with that. Ethan shook his head in amazement. She's stronger than I ever was at her age. She learned that from you, Claire pointed out. Kids don't develop that kind of resilience in a vacuum. The weekend passed in a blur of quiet domesticity. Ethan went home Saturday to catch up on work and laundry, but returned to Claire's that evening for dinner. Sunday morning, they went to the farmer's market together, then spent the afternoon at Ethan's house preparing for Emma's return. When Emma's flight landed Sunday evening, Ethan picked her up alone, giving her space to decompress. She emerged from the arrival gate, looking tired but composed, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Hey, Dad," she said, hugging him tightly. "Hey yourself," Ethan replied, holding her close. "You okay?" "I am," Emma said, pulling back. "Can we talk about it at home? I'm exhausted." They drove in comfortable silence, Emma's head resting against the window as she watched the familiar streets pass by. At home, she dropped her bag and collapsed onto the couch with a heavy sigh. "So?" Ethan prompted gently, sitting in the chair across from her. Emma was quiet for a long moment, gathering her thoughts. "Sarah's nice," she said finally. "She tries hard. She asked about school and soccer and my friends. She cooked my favorite foods from when I was a baby, which was sweet, except I don't remember any of them being my favorites because I don't remember her." Ethan stayed silent, letting her process. "She apologized," Emma continued, "said leaving was the hardest thing she ever did, said she thinks about me every day, said she knows she can't make up for lost time but wants to try to build something now." Emma's voice was steady, matter of fact. "And I believe she believes all that. But Dad, here's the thing. I don't need her to make up for anything. My life isn't missing a piece that she could fill. You filled it." Ethan's eyes burned. Let me finish," Emma said. "I'm not saying that to make you feel good or because I think it's what you want to hear. I'm saying it because it's true. You were enough. You were always enough. And Sarah can send cards and cook dinners and apologize all she wants, but that doesn't change the fact that you're my parent. You're the one who showed up." "What do you want going forward?" Ethan asked, his voice rough with emotion. "With her?" Emma shrugged. "Maybe we text sometimes. Maybe I visit again if I feel like it. But I'm not looking for a mother-daughter relationship because I don't need one. I already have a parent." They sat together in the quiet living room, the weight of Emma's words settling around them. After a while, Emma looked up with a knowing smile. "So are you going to tell me about Claire, or do I have to interrogate you?" "What do you want to know?" Ethan asked. "Everything. Start with Thanksgiving and don't leave out any details." "Well, leave out some details," Emma amended. "But I want to know how you're feeling about all this." So Ethan told her about Thanksgiving dinner, about staying over, about spending the weekend together. He kept it appropriate but honest, and Emma listened with the kind of attention that made him remember she wasn't a child anymore. "I'm happy for you, Dad," she said when he finished, "and I'm really glad you're letting yourself have this." "Me too," Ethan admitted, "though I'm still figuring out how to balance it all. You're still my priority." "Dad, stop," Emma interrupted firmly. "I can be important without being your only priority. You're allowed to have a life that includes me and other things. That's healthy. That's normal." Over the following weeks, that balance became the new normal. Ethan saw Claire several times a week, sometimes at her place, sometimes at his. Emma met Claire officially over pizza one Wednesday evening, and the two of them bonded over their shared exasperation with Ethan's tendency to overthink everything. "He spent 20 minutes this morning debating which shirt to wear," Emma told Claire conspiratorially. 20 minutes for coffee. "He does the same thing with text messages," Claire replied. "I can see him typing and deleting and typing again. Just send the message, Ethan." "I'm right here," Ethan protested, though he was smiling. "We know," they said in unison, then dissolved into laughter. Watching them interact, seeing Emma relax around Claire and Claire treat Emma with genuine interest rather than obligation, something in Ethan's chest expanded. This was what family could look like. Chosen, built, imperfect, but real. December arrived with the first real snow, and with it came new challenges. The housing project hit another snag, this time with financing that threatened to shut everything down. Ethan spent 3 days buried in paperwork and phone calls, barely sleeping, the stress manifesting in short temper and exhaustion. Claire showed up at his house unannounced on the third night, letting herself in with the spare key he'd given her the week before. She found him at the kitchen table, surrounded by documents, looking haggard. "When did you last eat?" she asked, setting down a bag of takeout. I don't remember, Ethan admitted. When did you last sleep? Also don't remember. Claire pulled out a chair and sat across from him. Talk me through it. What's the worst case scenario here? Worst case? I lose the project, lose a significant amount of money, have to lay off half my crew, and potentially lose the business I've spent 15 years building. Ethan rubbed his eyes. Emma starts college in 3 years. I need this project to work. Okay, Claire said calmly. And what's the best case scenario? The financing comes through, the project finishes on schedule, and everything is fine. So we're somewhere between catastrophic failure and complete success, Claire observed. What can you actually control right now? Ethan looked at the paperwork spread before him. Not much. I've made the calls, submitted the applications. Now I just have to wait. Then waiting while destroying yourself with stress isn't going to change the outcome, Claire said. Eat this food. Get some sleep. Tomorrow you can spiral if you need to, but tonight you take care of yourself. I can't just... Ethan. Claire's voice was firm but kind. You taught me that you can't pour from an empty cup, remember? When I was burning out on that difficult client and you told me to set boundaries, take your own advice. He stared at her, then at the cold container of Chinese food she'd brought, then back at her. When did you get so wise? I've been learning from the best, Claire said softly. They ate together at the kitchen table, Claire asking questions about the project, not to solve anything, but just to let him process out loud. When Emma came downstairs for water, she found them there and joined the conversation, offering her own teenage perspective on risk and fear. My debate coach says the worst thing you can do is catastrophize before you have actual information, Emma said. You're borrowing tomorrow's problems when you don't even know if they're real problems yet. Your debate coach is very wise, Claire observed. She is, Emma agreed. Also, Dad, you look terrible. Go to bed. I'm fine. You're not fine, you're exhausted, Emma said. Claire, back me up here. Your daughter is absolutely right, Claire said. Bed. Now. Outnumbered and too tired to argue, Ethan let them shepherd him upstairs. Claire stayed over, not for romance but for support, her presence in his bed a comfort rather than a complication. When he woke the next morning, she was already up, making coffee and talking quietly with Emma about something that had them both laughing. The financing came through 2 days later. The relief was so profound, Ethan actually had to sit down when he got the call. The project would continue. His crew would keep their jobs. Everything he'd been terrified of losing was secure. He called Claire first, then Emma, both of them celebrating his success with genuine joy. That evening, Emma insisted they all go out to dinner to celebrate. Her treat, she said, using birthday money she'd been saving. At the restaurant, a small Italian place Emma loved, they sat in a corner booth and ordered too much food. Emma raised her water glass in a toast. To Dad, for not giving up even when things got scary. And to Claire for showing up when we needed you. She paused, then added, to family, in whatever form it takes. To family, Ethan and Claire echoed, glasses clinking. Later, after Emma had gone to bed and Claire was preparing to head home, she stopped at the door. I love you, she said quietly. I probably should have led up to that more, made it romantic or meaningful, but I'm terrible at that stuff. I just wanted you to know. Ethan's heart expanded so rapidly, he thought his chest might crack open. I love you too, he said, the words feeling both terrifying and inevitable. I have for a while now. Good, Claire said, kissing him softly. Because I'm not going anywhere. Christmas approached, bringing with it questions about traditions and expectations. Emma wanted Claire to spend Christmas Eve with them, their usual tradition of pizza and bad movies. Claire wanted Ethan and Emma to join her for Christmas brunch with a few close friends. We do both, Ethan suggested. Christmas Eve here, Christmas morning there. We're building something new. It doesn't have to look like anyone else's traditions. So that's what they did. Christmas Eve found the three of them on Ethan's couch, eating pizza and laughing at a terrible holiday movie, the tree in the corner glowing warmly. Emma fell asleep halfway through the second movie, her head on Ethan's shoulder, and he carefully extracted himself to carry her upstairs like he had when she was small. When he came back down, Claire was cleaning up pizza boxes, humming along to the Christmas music playing softly from the speaker. She's getting too big for me to carry much longer, Ethan said, watching Claire work. But you'll always be her dad, Claire replied. That doesn't change. No, Ethan agreed, but everything else is changing. In 3 years, she'll leave for college. In a few years after that, she'll build her own life. And I need to be okay with that. Claire turned to face him fully. Are you? Okay with it? I'm getting there, Ethan said honestly. For the first time, I can imagine a life beyond being Emma's dad. A life that includes you. Maybe other things I haven't let myself want. It's terrifying and exciting in equal measure. That sounds about right, Claire said, crossing to him. I feel the same way, like I'm building something I never thought I could have. Christmas morning, they all drove to Claire's apartment together, Emma excited to meet Claire's friends. The brunch was warm and chaotic, filled with people who'd known Claire through her caregiving years and were openly thrilled to see her happy. They welcomed Ethan and Emma without reservation, folding them into conversations and laughter with easy grace. On the drive home, Emma declared it the best Christmas she could remember. Not because of the presents or the food, she clarified, but because everyone was just happy, really, genuinely happy. Yeah, Ethan agreed, glancing at Claire in the passenger seat, her hand resting on his knee. They were. New Year's Eve arrived with quiet celebration. Marcus and Jennifer hosted a small party, and for the first time in 15 years, Ethan attended with a date. Claire wore a dark green dress that made her eyes striking, and Ethan couldn't stop looking at her. You clean up nice, Cole, Marcus said, pulling him aside at one point, and you look happier than I've seen you since college. I am happy, Ethan admitted. Took me long enough to get here. Better late than never, Marcus said, clapping him on the shoulder. Claire's great, by the way. Jennifer really likes her. At midnight, when everyone counted down and couples kissed, Ethan pulled Claire close and kissed her like they had all the time in the world. When they broke apart, she was smiling. New year, new us, she said. Better us, Ethan corrected. Not new, just finally letting ourselves be fully present. January brought Emma's 16th birthday, and with it a request that surprised Ethan. I want to have a party, she said. Not a big thing, just some friends, and I want Claire to help me plan it because you're terrible at party planning. That's fair, Ethan admitted. Emma and Claire spent weeks plotting, keeping most details secret from Ethan. When the party day arrived, his house was transformed. Decorations, a playlist Emma had curated, food that Claire had coordinated from Emma's favorite restaurants. 15 teenagers descended with energy and noise, and Ethan retreated to the kitchen with Claire, watching through the doorway as Emma laughed with her friends. She's so grown up, Claire observed. Too grown up, Ethan said. I'm not ready for her to keep growing. Yes, you are, Claire said confidently. You've been preparing her for this her whole life, teaching her to be independent and strong and capable. Now you get to watch all that work pay off. Later that evening, after the last guest had left and Emma was upstairs on a group video call with friends, Claire and Ethan cleaned up together. In the kitchen, surrounded by paper plates and empty cups, Claire stopped what she was doing and turned to him. Move in with me, she said. Ethan's hands stilled on the trash bag he was filling. What? Move in with me, Claire repeated. Not right now. Emma's got 2 more years of high school, and I wouldn't ask you to disrupt that. But after, when she goes to college. Don't stay in this house alone. Build a life with me. Ethan's heart hammered against his ribs. That's 2 years away. I know, Claire said, but I also know I want a future with you. And I'm terrible at romantic gestures, so this is me trying, asking you to plan a life with me instead of just drifting and hoping things work out. Yes, Ethan said, the word escaping before he'd fully processed the question. Yes, I want that. A life with you. A future. All of it. Claire's smile was brilliant, lighting up her entire face. She crossed the kitchen and kissed him, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her, holding tight to this woman who'd refused to let him disappear, who'd seen him when he couldn't see himself, who'd taught him that being fully alive meant risking everything. Upstairs, Emma's laughter drifted down, full of joy and life and possibility. In his arms, Claire was solid and real, and his. And for the first time in 15 years, Ethan Cole wasn't just surviving. He was living. He was building a future that included himself, his wants, his needs, his right to take up space and be seen and loved without apology. The man who'd sat at the back table of Marcus's wedding, invisible and afraid, had finally stepped into the light, not because someone rescued him, but because he'd chosen to rescue himself. Because he'd learned that being a good father didn't require self-erasure, that showing up for others started with showing up for yourself. Emma would leave for college in 2 years, would build her own remarkable life, would carry forward the lessons he'd taught her about resilience and authenticity and love. Claire would be there, building a life with him that honored both their pasts and their future. His business would continue to grow, would create homes for families, would be the work of his hands and heart. And Ethan would be there for all of it, not hiding in the background, not waiting in the shadows, but fully, completely, unapologetically present. The man at the back table had finally come home to himself. The story that had begun with isolation and fear ended with connection and hope. Not because everything was perfect, but because Ethan had finally learned the most important lesson of all. He deserved to exist in his own life, to take up space, to be seen, to love and be loved in return. He deserved to be more than Emma's father, more than his work, more than the sum of his sacrifices. He deserved to be Ethan, flawed and trying, scared and brave, alone for so long but finally, beautifully, choosing not to be anymore. And that choice, more than any grand gesture or dramatic transformation, was what changed everything.